And may I request all the delegates here to please get your seats. We already have Joint Secretary in the FICCI building, and he's expected to join us any minute of time. Can I request, we are going to have a session on very interesting CEO's panel discussion on Skills India Industry Invest. May I call upon Sri Sanjeev Duggalji, co-chair FICCI Skill Development Forum. He's also CN Director, Centum Learning. Our panelist, Mr. Shashir Jaipuria, CMD, Genie Filaments Limited. Other panelist, Mailika Duran, member of the Board of Directors, PHCO Turkey. The panelist, Mr. Sandeep Ranjan Das, former MD and CEO, Reliance Jio Infocom. May I request all of you senior panelists to please join. Also requesting my colleagues to please escort all the delegates who are outside because we are going to start. The session will be moderated by Shri Sanjeev Duggalji. He's a co-chair FICCI Skill Development Forum. He's also CEO and Director, Centum Learning Limited. The session is very interesting because while we talk about skills development in India, the largest issue which we have been talking about, who is going to invest. And I believe that Indian skills ecosystem is not yet ready, where learner becomes the epicenter of investing for the skills development. So this session we are going to deliberate about how industry can invest. This here theme being industry. So may I request with approval from moderators, since the Joint Secretary is expected to come. Yes, he's done the binding, sir. So if you say that we can start or we can wait for him, as you say. Yeah, okay. Sir, I think you can set the context and let him come, sir.
Good afternoon. The session we have right now is really about industry investing in skills, and I can see Rajesh is here also. Okay. So, now on behalf of FICCI, let me welcome Mr. Rajesh Agarwal, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Skills Development and Entrepreneurship, the Government of India. He's taking care of the national policy on skill development, matters related to ITIs and skill universities, and bringing the PPP element through partnership with industry. So I think he's an important voice representing the policy and the approach that the government is taking on it. We've got Mr. Shishir Jaipuria, who's the Chairman and Managing Director of Genie Filaments Limited. He's also the Chairman of the Textiles Committee at FICCI, and also Chairman of the Seth Anandram Jaipuria Education Society. And will represent one of the industry players in one of the largest skill gap sectors, which is textiles. We have Mr. Aykar Duran, who's a member of the Board of Directors from the Bursa Chamber of Commerce and Industry in Turkey. He's responsible for vocational training and skill initiatives of the chamber. He will have a translator with him since Mr. Duran does not speak English. And we have Mr. Sandeep Das, who's the former Managing Director and CEO of Reliance Jio Infocom. He's an expert in the telecom space. Sandeep is one of the founding members of the mobile telephony in India that started Hutchison Max Telecom, now called Vodafone. And he was appointed as Managing Director and CEO of Reliance Jio Infocom to oversee the country's largest 4G rollout, besides being on the board. Let me just set the context for our session. I think at FICCI, Shobha is here, Mr. Reddy is here, we've debated this many times, that one of the challenges and that's the theme of this whole, the day actually, is that engaging industry and engaging CEOs and engaging the leadership is very critical on the subject of skills, right? Because my personal experience earlier used to be that when we used to do this kind of a session, we used to mostly get the supply chain side in the room. Training providers, training companies, new people who had just started up those businesses, etc. And while we would get the government very often represented, it was hard. But today, if you've noticed, all of you, from the morning, we've had very, very senior CEOs and leaders of large industry present, and that continues with this forum also. Now, obviously, in the skill mission, the context is that in the skill mission, industry is a major stakeholder, because the industry is the one who determines how, and actually the role of industry will determine how this breaks through. right? And there are many things that have bothered us in terms of will industry pay for it? Will industry pay more for skills? What is the engagement of industry with the topic of skills, etc.? In fact, our view has always been that one of the top 5 to-do items for a CEO in India currently should be the skills issue, right? So this session is really about looking at industry, its outlook, and its views on investing in this subject in India. What I will do is, I will request each panel member to make a short opening statement, which will obviously reflect a little more about industry investing from the point of view of the domain that they represent. I will then moderate it with a set of questions, and then build the conversation, and towards the end we can have a Q&A session with the group, so that this can be raised. Yeah. Is that right? Thank you.
Sorry, my apologies for being late for this session. And first of all, I think this is, when I was asked to come and chair this session, I think it is the most apt session that I would like to fit in myself to. Because I feel anything that we talk of skilling, any skill development, vocational training, whatever we try to do, without industry it is incomplete. It is the industry which has driven skill development all across the world. Wherever any successful examples that we come across, we find it is industry in its own way, whether by way of investment, energy, apprenticeship, trainers, assessors, trying to develop a complete ecosystem. Industry has contributed largely towards a successful skill ecosystem across the world. In India also, I think there have been islands of excellence where industry is doing quite a good work in many areas. Many places, a lot of industries doing a lot of skill development efforts for their own resources and also for outside also to some extent. But as a country, we have not been able to have a structure or a formal structure wherein industry is proactively engaging itself in and trying to build up an ecosystem where skill becomes a way of life. There has been efforts for last 4-5 years. National Skill Development Corporation is an effort in this direction. The sector skill councils that have been constituted, 37 of them have been constituted, 31 of them are operational. The broad objective, the basic objective of the sector skill council is to bring in that industry connect. But with all these efforts also, I think still we are far behind. There's a long way to go. The proactive engagement of industry has been missing. We have been finding industry as a part of governing council of sector skill councils, but I don't think they are as active as part of the meetings and the running of the sector skill councils. So how do we bring in industry? What is that is lacking? The government has also walked the way. There's a lot of issues that were raised by industry. I think government has addressed over last few years, whether it is the amendments in the Apprenticeship Act, whether it's running of ITIs, whether it's looking into the curriculum afresh, whether it's looking occupational standard or outcome-based training. I think a lot of issues have been addressed by government, and government is always open to see, because we also clearly believe that this is one area which we feel if the government can take on and run, we can't do it. It is the industry which will have to be the pilot. We have to play a secondary role in this whole sector. So it's important that we hear the industry and see how we can take this engagement forward, wherein you take the driver's seat and we play the co-pilot role. With these opening remarks, I expect to hear all our co-panelists and then come back to you with some of the thoughts that we have in government right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Agarwal. Mr. Jaipuria, would you like to give your experience from the point of view of the textile industry and its role in building the skills ecosystem?
Good afternoon, friends. I represent the textile and clothing industry, and as you all are aware that this industry is most labor-intensive industry. Presently in India, the total employment in the textile sector with directly is 35 million people, and the overall turnover of the Indian industry is close to $110 billion, out of which $40 billion in terms of exports. As we heard some of the people talking in the panel in the morning, that this is the sector which is very, very labor intensive and is going to grow because China is vacating space, and we have a tremendous opportunity. And that would mean that this $110 billion in the next 10 years will become $350 billion if we put our act together properly. It will also mean that we require additional 25 million people to be trained in the textile and clothing industry. We have seen that the textile and clothing industry essentially is in clusters all over the country, but the labor has to be sourced from all over the country. So there's always a challenge of getting the right set of people to work in the industries. As somebody was mentioning, that there's a plant in Kerala, you have to source your labor from Bihar or from UP or from other states where the labor is available, and that's a big challenge. So the migration of labor is a major difficulty that we have been facing. We have been having units in Rajasthan, UP and Gujarat, and we see that a lot of labor is not prepared to come because of Manrega. And now the challenge is that you have to deploy more of ladies workers. So there's a transformation that is taking place in the industry wherein you focus on skilling the women workforce so that they can take responsibility. And I'm proud to say that this has worked very well, although it came as a problem for the industry, but subsequently most of the spinning units and the garment industry has been able to successfully use the women workforce in a very effective manner, both empowering them and are able to raise the productivity and the law and order problems. As far as the textile and clothing industry is concerned, there are three specific sectorial skill councils. The one is related to the spinning, knitting, processing sector. The other relates to the garment sector. And the third is relating to the handicraft and the carpet sector. And all these three sectors are quite active today. I understand that the Textile Sector Council, which is representing the spinning, weaving and processing, has already framed guidelines and benchmarked about 60 separate categories for the workers, and they are in the process of doing it for 400 different categories, which I am hopeful they'll be able to do in the next 3-4 years. They have been given a target of training 11.5 lakh people in the next 10 years. But the garment sector is much more aggressive because there are a lot of value addition that has to be created within the country. And there the task is to train 93 lakh people in the next 10 years. Most of the industries, the larger industries, are intensely engaged with these various sectors. And I do believe, and I'm confident, that because there's a need, there have not been formal training till now, except that initiatives were being taken by the industry on their own to ensure that they get the right skills. But this initiative of the NSDC and that of the Government of India, the industry will be very proactively working with them, and they will be participating at every level. Thank you.
Industry from its beginnings. Can you share your experience about skilling and investment in skilling, etc., of that industry?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. I remember in one of the meetings in an international forum, C.K. Prahlad got extremely frustrated when people in India kept talking about how population is a problem. And he turned around and said, why is population not our weapon? And I'm again reminded of the fact that when you actually go down and look at the population, and then you look at an ocean, and you're in a boat, thirsty. So they say there's water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. We are a huge population, but we have a very large number of people, but an extremely small number of people whom we call skilled by percentages. Skilling, to my mind, is not only about skilling, but a much larger context about the competitiveness of a nation. It is about competence, and above all, it is about quality. Because if you lack these three things, you can never make your mark in the international world. And we have been dormant and a sleeping giant in the world for a long, long time. We have been navel gazing because our domestic market eats up most of our skill. Chairman Agarwal rightly said that, it takes two to tango. It cannot just happen because the government acts as a welfare state and continues to take the responsibility of being a grandfather to everything, every problem in this country. And I would extend Chairman Agarwal's statement and say it goes beyond corporate. This afternoon I briefly heard Naina Lal Kidwai, and she talked about the fact that you should involve NGOs and everybody possible, because it has to be a national fervor to build up skill. In 1994, as Sanjeev might have just mentioned, I was part of the team that started the first mobile company in this country, which is Hutchison Telecom, which is now famously known as Vodafone. And we were 950 million people. There were 25 million fixed line phones. Don't ask me how we called our driver, how we met at malls, how we fed children from school. And when a girl was 15 years old and she came from a middle-aged middle sort of income family, her parents booked two things for her. One was a cooking gas connection, and the other was a telephone connection, so that by the time she was a nubile nymphet ready to get married, these two things could go as part of her trousseau. If you look at the extent of employment that has been provided, we didn't know where to look for telecom people. We got people from the technical side from Signals in the army, who produced some outstanding people, and from DOT, which still produces some of the finest engineers that the private sector can't produce. We didn't know where to get customer service people, so we went to hotels and airlines. So we poached virtually every industry and combed them all together into something called telecom. Today the world has changed a lot. There are a lot of elaborate training programs. Some companies have introduced management training programs. There are e-training programs, etc., etc., etc. But I think we are very far away from creating the quality of skill that we require for this business, even now. I have done a lot of work. I personally have not done a lot of work, but my firms which I've worked for has done a lot of work with Sanjeev's firm, which has created a lot of skill and quality and measurement. But I think it's very far away from where we are. I will not eat up more time, because I think these issues are to be discussed in general. I would just like to add one small point, with your permission, Sanjeev, which is that which is actually one very short snippet. When we were graduating, my father, who was a government servant, wanted me to get a class 1 post job. And he was very unhappy because I was joining the private industry, because he thought I'll get sacked. And there's no pension, and then nobody ever sacks you. A little while ago, he was talking to my son, and he was very thrilled that my son has left a consultancy job and now wants to work for Invest India, which is part of a government initiative. I think miracles can be done through the process of public-private participation.
Mr. Duran, could you give us your opening statement on how industry has participated on this subject? Has participated on this subject in Turkey.
Değerli protokol, saygıdeğer misafirler, hepinizi Bursa Ticaret ve Sanayi Odası Yönetimi Kurulu adına saygı ve sevgiyle selamlıyorum.
Esteemed members of the protocol, distinguished guests and speakers, on behalf of the Bursa Chamber of Commerce and Industry, I salute you and welcome you all.
Türkiye'den sizlere kucak dolusu sevgi ve selamlar getirdim.
I bring you lots of love and respect from Turkey.
Öncelikle bu yıl FİKİ'nin 8.sini düzenlediği Küresel Beceri Zirvesi'ne hoş geldiniz demek istiyorum.
First, I would like to welcome you all to the 8th Global Skills Summit organized by FICCI.
Ayrıca Türkiye'nin ve Bursa'nın tecrübesini paylaşmamıza imkan sağladığı için FICCI'ye ve UNDP İstanbul Özel Sektör Merkezi'ne teşekkür etmek istiyorum.
I would also like to thank FICCI and United Nations Development Program Istanbul International Center for Private Sector in Development for giving us the opportunity to share Turkey and Bursa's experience here.
Burada Türkiye'den Bursa Ticaret ve Sanayi Odası'nı temsil etmekteyim.
Hereby I represent Bursa Chamber of Commerce and Industry from Turkey.
Bu panele Bootcamp'in kurucusu olan Türkiye'nin önde gelen sanayicilerden Sayın Fahrettin Gülener'in katılması bekleniyordu.
We were expecting one of the leading industrialists from Turkey, Mr. Fahrettin Gülener, to join this panel as he is the founder of our vocational training initiative.
Ancak annesinin sağlığıyla ilgili acil bir durum sebebiyle kendisi katılım gösterememiştir.
However, as a result of an unexpected emergency regarding his mother's health, he wasn't able to participate today.
Buradan annesinin en kısa zamanda sağlığına kavuşmasını diliyorum.
We wish that his mother has a speedy and lasting recovery.
Bursa, Türkiye'nin önde gelen endüstri merkezlerinden birisidir.
Bursa is one of the leading industrial hubs of Turkey.
Otomotiv, tekstil, turizm gibi alanlara oldukça gelişmiş sektörlere sahip olan Bursa, Türkiye'nin ihracatında da önemli rol oynamaktadır.
Sectors such as automotive, textile and tourism are very advanced in Bursa, thus the city playing an important role for Turkey's exports.
Bursa, İstanbul'un ardından Türkiye'nin en çok ihracat yapan ikinci şehridir.
Bursa is the second highest ranking city in terms of exports in Turkey after Istanbul.
Bursa Ticaret ve Sanayi Odası ise yaklaşık 35 bin üyesiyle Türkiye'nin en büyük ticaret ve sanayi odasıdır.
Bursa Chamber of Commerce and Industry, with its over 35,000 members, is the largest chamber of commerce and industry in Turkey.
Bursa'nın dinamizminin ve Türkiye'nin ekonomisinin büyümesinin sürdürülebilmesi için mesleki eğitim ve beceri geliştirme büyük önem taşımaktadır.
Vocational training and skills development are crucial to sustain Turkey's economic growth and Bursa's dynamism.
Mesleki beceri ve istihdam edilebilirlik konusunda özel sektör liderliğindeki çözümleri destekleyen odamız, Bootcamp ile sanayinin ihtiyacı olan nitelikli teknik personeli sanayinin ihtiyaçları doğrultusunda eğitmektedir.
As our chamber supports private sector-led solutions in the area of vocational skills and employability, we are training the skilled technical personnel required by the industry in line with the industry's demand through Bootcamp.
Bursa Ticaret ve Sanayi Odası Eğitim Vakfı yani Bootcamp, mesleki beceri için arz ve talebi yerel düzeyde buluşturmayı hedeflemektedir.
Bursa Chamber of Commerce and Industry Education Foundation, Bootcamp in short, aims to bridge the demand and supply of vocational skills at the local level.
Mr. Duran, can I make a request? What I'll do is, one of the questions that I have relates to engagement in industry. Maybe I can throw that to Mr. Duran and bring him back at an appropriate point with that context. Yeah? Is that okay? All right, Mr. Agarwal, you talked about the fact that government cannot be the main player. Industry, you have to be a supporting cast. So what do you expect specifically from industry? I mean, I'll give you an example of the context I'm saying. If you talk to industry, and if you take the top 5,000 companies in India, so let's say Mohandas Pai was here in the morning, and if I ask him, he'll say, look, we've created a 100-acre campus in Mysore. We spend 1,100 crores on skilling software engineers. I'm just giving an example, right? If I go to Genpact, they'll talk. So if I take the top 5,000 companies in India and look at the fact that over the last decade, the cumulative amount of money, energy, resources that they may have spent on actually skilling and training people would be quite enormous. Obviously, it is largely for their own consumption, which is what industry will do. So that's their perspective, right? So, I mean, what is it that you specifically want from industry?
Thank you, Mr. Dougal. I think we need to appreciate the fact that India, the organized sector employment is only 7 to 8%. 90 to 93% of the employment is in unorganized sector. When we talk of industry, I think the industry which has been investing in this ecosystem maybe for themselves only, for training, skilling people, have been in people, big industry which have been there in the organized sector. But ultimately 90% of the people are moving to the unorganized sector, are MSME sectors which are employing less than 9, 10, 20 people. Most of them must be employing that. The idea is, as an industry, if one can come together and develop an ecosystem wherein training is held on industry-led standard, industry recruits at whatever level based on certified skilled manpower only, provides a skill premium so that there is a market for skills in the country, then only this can be a sustainable model, it can run forward. Today, in the ministry, when we discuss, we find it very amazing to see that we are, on one hand, we keep on talking about absence, shortage of skilled manpower, which is impeding growth of our industry. Shortage of skilled manpower, which is impacting the productivity of our industry. On the other hand, we keep on seeing that we are trying to push private training providers to provide skill training, but still they are not able to make out a good financial model out of it, good business model out of it. The people are not coming for skilling. The people who are getting skilled are not getting jobs. So the problem is either we are not skilling what is required, or we are not able to close or link those skilling with the jobs. So and then either the problem is the industry is not looking at the market to provide the skills. So there is some mismatch. If this whole loop is closed, I wonder why this cannot work as a very sustainable, long-standing model. So we need to look at it. Country after country has been able to do it. So somewhere looking individually is good, but looking collectively, I think, will help sort out this problem. Thank you.
So you're saying one of the things that you expect industry to do is to perhaps, say, pay a premium for somebody who's skilled? That could be one of your asks, right?
First of all, recruit skilled manpower. You have got sector skill councils. Why not recruit only sector skill council certified manpower at certain level? Why can't we? We can at least take a vow that from next year at least 20% of our manpower will be sector skill council certified. In next 5 years, it will be 100% of the people coming into the system will be. Because if you create a market and a demand where then only the quality issues, everything will start falling in place. Because if you are not doing, people will not come for training, the people will not come for training, the training infrastructure will not improve, training infrastructure will not improve, quality will remain. So it is a vicious circle which will never break. So we'll have to, ultimately you are the employer, you can only pay the premium. So at some stage this intervention has to come through.
So, I'll just share with you, because I talk a lot to the industry because we work so much with the industry. I think there are two perspectives I've heard from them, right? One is that, when you hire a skilled person, right, there is a whole lot of school education, college education, work skills, livelihood skills that have gone into his creation, of that person. And industry can't invest. Industry is expecting that the institutions of the schooling system, the formal education system, the ITIs, for example, produce at least 70% of that is taken care of. And that it's because what the training that skills development companies do is a 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 15-day stuff. Right? Now that can at best be a trade and a finishing to an individual. So I think that's one challenge that industry raises very often. And I ask people from industry to see what they have. Secondly, what they feel is that I think industry is very selective about the fact that they believe, at least large industry believes, that we will hire and we will do it ourselves. We know what it takes to train the person, right? We know what our requirements are. We know what the content needs to be facilitated, etc. And we will choose who will do it for us. That's part of my business model, for example. So I think that's their perspective, right? And when they want to do more than that, which is your CSR policy, etc., etc., etc., they're quite willing to. I don't think there's a lack of willingness. I think that could be one way to. Tell me, Sandeep or Shishir, any of you, let's say in the textile industry, what percentage of your revenue or do you spend on, say, skills development?
Well, as far as the textile industry is concerned, we face a major challenge. Although we recruit people, particularly in the spinning or weaving or processing industry, who have gone through a formal education only up to class 8 or class 10. But despite that fact, we are not able to get people. So a lot of time and effort goes into the training of people. And unfortunately, despite our efforts, there's a huge attrition. Almost 70 to 80% of the people leave during the year because the working condition, and particularly the textile industry, on the spinning and weaving is not that conducive.
So what is the estimate of the spend that the textile industry does itself on skills development?
Well, if you calculate the total compounded cost of training and rehiring people, it will be close to 3 to 4%. It is phenomenally high.
Of the entire revenue?
Of the total cost that you incur. And similarly is the case for the garment industry. Because what we feel that the skill levels, what is prevalent in India, vis-a-vis other countries like Bangladesh, China, Vietnam, there's a big gap. And textile and clothing industry moves because of labor arbitrage from one country to another. So India has an opportunity if we are able to improve our skill levels.
And Sandeep, what's your experience in this? I mean, I have some numbers, but I mean, it's you are the person who's been spending the money, so.
As I recall, the cost of human resources as such overall in companies would range anywhere between 5% to 8% of revenues, depending on a startup or a larger organization. And I would believe that training is a fraction of that cost. So it is abysmally low.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
But I would like to endorse the fact that in the telecom industry, I think we've found great benefit from ITI trained people in particular, and it has been a very successful program. But I think, again, the chairman has said something very interesting, and I want to pick up on that when he says that he asked the question, is there a mismatch between the skills that are on offer versus what is required by the industry? And I think that's probably true. The other thing is that just training a person in a particular function doesn't provide the necessary all-roundedness that is required to function in a very, very competitive, cutthroat private sector. And you know that, the overall personality, presentation skills, stuff like that all matters. We can't ignore it. So it's like, saving a tiger cub and breeding it at home and then suddenly letting it out into the jungle, and the tiger doesn't know how to hunt. And therefore, it's very important to understand that aspect. The other interesting thing, which you made a remark while we were in the briefing session, was that one of the good things is that the number of CEOs who have stepped on here to speak on skilling has increased. It is a sign of times. Everybody is bleeding as far as hiring and retaining staff is concerned, as Mr. Jaipur also said. And therefore, I would think that some amount of, the chairman, with due apologies to you, you said people must take a vow. I think it has to be a bit stronger. It has to be a combination of a carrot and a stick. I was in Malaysia. I was heading one of the largest companies over there a little while ago. And they had introduced something called corporate responsibility, not CSR. And corporate responsibility had 4 components: the customer, the community, the environment, and the workforce. And the Malaysian Stock Exchange, which is called the Bursa, incidentally, had made it absolutely important for all companies to submit a CR report showing what they are doing for skill development and people. And at the same time, there was adequate incentive for people to engage in this activity. Otherwise, you will get a lot of lip sympathy, you'll get a lot of rhetoric, but it will only be based on need. I think the skills also need to be broadened to cover other aspects of work. Because as organizations are becoming more and more competitive, India is faced with 2 things. One is all organizations are now challenged with scale. So hiring large number of people and training them is near impossible. Number 2, organizations are becoming flatter to become more effective. So supervision is becoming, the span of control is becoming much larger. So therefore, again, mentorship and training is sorely missing. So therefore, I remember another program that was done in Malaysia, which was called the Pemandu program, which was called the Economic Drive. And the most successful CEO of Malaysia was hired to run that program from the Prime Minister's office as a private-public cooperation, of which one of the agendas was the skilling. So I was forced as a CEO of the company to send two of my best people, not people I could spare, to become part of this organization. So while we talk about skilling, I also want to introduce something called lost skills. Look at the number of people. I mean, let me take my example. I'm now probably in the sunset of my career. And after a while, I'll fade away and retire in some corner. But I have built two $20 billion businesses. How can my skills be used? I was actually asking myself this question. What is my know-how? Is it to connect a wire? Is it to sell a SIM card? Is it to appoint a dealer? Is it to counsel somebody? It's to build large organizations and execute. This is another firepower across industries that is available with the government to hire to help in this process.
No, that's a very, very valid point. Mr. Duran, if I can ask a very specific question, can you share 2 or 3 engagement models with industry and what industry has done, to further the skill movement in Turkey?
Teşekkür ediyorum.
I'd like to thank you for the question.
Güney Kore'den Almanya'ya kadar birçok tecrübenin birleştiği başarılı bir beceri geliştirme modeli Bootcamp.
We have a very unique skills development model developed by the industry, taking on the examples of Germany and South Korea, called Bootcamp.
İzin verirseniz Bootcamp modelini birazcık daha detaylandırarak daha iyi anlama adına sizlere bir bilgi vermek istiyorum.
If you allow me, I will provide more details about our vocational training initiative to better understand the industry engagement.
A few points.
Birkaç nokta.
Evet. Özel sektörün liderliği, Bootcamp kar amacı gütmeyen bir eğitim merkezi olarak 2009 yılında kuruldu.
Bootcamp was established as a not-for-profit vocational training center in 2009.
Bu tarihten itibaren Bursa endüstrisine nitelikli insan kaynağı kazandırma ve gençler başta olmak üzere dezavantajlı grupların istihdam edilebilmelerini artırmak üzere faaliyet göstermektedir.
Since this date, it has been operating towards generating quality human resources for the industry of Bursa and to increase the employability of the disadvantaged groups, starting with youth.
Bootcamp odamızın liderliğinde özel sektör tarafından başlatılmış ve yönetilmekte olan bir girişimdir.
Bootcamp is under the leadership of our chamber. It has been initiated and managed by the private sector.
Özel sektörün liderliği, katılımı ve destekleri Bootcamp'in kursiyerlerine piyasada talep gören mesleki beceriler kazandırılmasını sağlamaktadır.
The leadership of the private sector, its continuous engagement and support has enabled the trainees of Bootcamp to gain vocational skills sought in the market.
Bootcamp en son teknolojilerle uygun olarak donatılmış olan özel sektör liderliğindeki ikonik eğitim merkezlerinin iyi bir örneğidir.
Bootcamp is an iconic training center under private sector management equipped with state-of-art technologies.
Merkez yerel bir organize sanayi bölgesi tarafından tahsis edilen 12.000 metrekarelik bir alanda yer almaktadır.
The center is located in a 12,000 square meters area allocated by the local industrial zone.
Merkezin makine parkuru bölgedeki fabrikalarda bulunanların en iyi örnekleridir.
The machinery and the equipment at the center are the same as their counterparts at the factories, donated by the local industrialists themselves.
Ve birçoğu sanayiciler tarafından bağışlanmıştır.
And most of the equipment have been given by the business people.
Okay, so that's a significant thing. You're saying industries gifted the bills of material, the equipment, and the infrastructure.
Evet, sanayicinin bu modelin tamamen içinde olduğunu gösteriyor.
Yes, this shows that the industrialist is at the core of the model.
Very good.
Bootcamp her yıl tekstilden Mekatronike, otomotiv parçalarından bilgisayar donanımlarına kadar farklı alanlarda 3000 kişi eğitme kapasitesine sahiptir.
Bootcamp has the capacity to train around 3,000 people every year in a wide range of areas, from textile to mechatronics and from auto parts to hardware.
Eğitim merkezimizin
Great. I mean,
%80
actually, we also this is very much like the multi-skill centers that are being initiated in India, and industry can play a very significant role in sort of providing infrastructure and capex. So, Shishir, if I can ask you, you know, the CSR, this whole movement of the CSR funds from industry and from companies. Yeah, how do you think that can play a role in being, you know, industry's contribution towards the whole skills program?
Well, with now
And
mandation,
in your company, for example, are you doing CSR and you spending some of that on skills development?
well, CSR will bring a lot of new initiatives in the skill sector. As far as we are concerned, we have been already having a lot of money which is put into the skill development at every stage, because we are into the garment industry. As I mentioned, almost 35% of your overall cost is the labor component, and you have to spend almost 3 to 4% to ensure that you are able to get the trained people that are required to give efficiency and the competitiveness for the particular sector. So we have been spending on that, but as far as the CRS activities are concerned, it's a new concept. We are already dwelling into it, whether we like to put it into education at the school level, because we wanted the school dropout students to be trained on vocational training in various other sectors, including for garment, embroidery, related to the garment industry as well. So these initiatives we are taking as far as we are concerned.
Because I think, you know, when we talk to the government, there's a lot of thought on, you know, how much of the CSR money can be spent towards the skills development agenda of India. You know, there are even thoughts of trying to push for 50% of that. And if that happens, that's a huge amount of resource that will get available. Yeah, Rajesh?
See, as far as I understand, CSR money is something that you cannot spend for yourself. It has to be, so you can't use that money directly for skilling your own employees. As far as technically, that is the fact that stays.
That's the law.
And that's why we have been telling industry to come forward, put in their CSR and put it in some corpus somewhere. It can be an industry corpus, in an industry body, trying to work the new policy for skill development and entrepreneurship clearly states that you can use this money through your sector skill councils, through your own corpus, but try to bring that money on the table to get back the skilling that you require. What we believe, there has been a lot of individual efforts, like he mentioned that there are 3 to 4% of the cost that is going in the training and upgradation of skills within the organization. What we are talking of internationally, if you look at 1 to 2% of the employee bill, that is coming out to be sufficient to provide the skilled manpower to the industry.
That is the norm. It's 2% of the payroll.
Malaysia example was being talked out. I understand there is a law which says that 1% or 2% of the pay bill has to be put in the corpus for skilling in the country. That is by law. Brazil also, it happens the same way. Germany is all about apprenticeship. 90% of the training is through apprenticeship, and the cost of skilling, I think 85% is borne by the industry only. So we need to bring it down collectively, then only we will be able to address this problem. Then only we will be able to address the problem down the line for smaller industries also and for the whole sector. Otherwise, this problem will keep on, individually will keep on bleeding. Collectively, probably if you work, maybe we will prosper better. We need to recognize this fact that collectively the experiments have been most successful. Individually, every industry, because to remain competitive, you have to upgrade skill. You have no other option. Skill is directly related to growth of your company and growth of the economy of the country also. I have not read about a correlation theory on this, but I believe if you take up any developed country all over the world, skill is something you will find that the skill development, wherever the GDP has grown up or the economy has grown, the skill development has also been positive and quite vibrant in those countries. So there obviously is some correlation, and that can only happen if you work collectively and try to do.
Correct. If you remember, Rajesh, we were in a meeting together with Mr. Mittal and Mr. Rudy and everybody, where the discussion was that if 2% of payroll bill industry pulls in, you will get, I think, 25% of the amount of the Provident Fund every year for a skills fund to sort of drive this whole initiative, which will be a contribution of industry towards it. And I remember Sunil in that meeting said, "I'll do it. If you ask me to do it, I'll do it."
There is in the policy we provide for this provision also. It's not a law in this country, but the roadmap we have laid down. We also believe industry needs to come forward and provide its 1% or 2% towards skilling, which needs to be go into a corpus, and that needs to be utilized effectively for skilling in the country. We clearly believe that if we want that money to come to the government and government will reinvest in skilling, that's not the way to do. It is the industry which has to handle that fund and do it. We are also working on a very transparent platform, and soon, probably next 6-8 months, if we are able to push it through, we'll try to launch a platform wherein industry can manage its own fund, an IT-based platform where you can put your own funds, track it down to the last beneficiary and the last person getting skilled out of it. We are trying to work out an aggregator platform which may be in public domain soon. The idea is to provide you a platform where if somebody is willing to put in, because there might be, and people may not be very sure of, if you put my CSR fund or my company funds, how it is being utilized, how it is being spent, can I track down to the real beneficiary, has the people actually been skilled and employed? So all these questions are a lot of questions which needs to be answered. We are trying to answer it through a transparent platform, and we hope to see it happen in next few months. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Duran, if you can complete your sharing of experiences with us on the same topics, industries, participation. After that, I can throw it open and we can do some Q&A with the group so that we can have some interaction.
Evet. Bootcamp'in kuruluş amaçlarından bir tanesi Bursa Ticaret ve Sanayi Odası Bursa şehri Türkiye'de yüksek teknolojili sanayinin gelişkin olduğu merkezi bir şehir.
One of the reasons why, as the Bursa Chamber of Commerce and Industry, we found our own vocational center is that because we require high technologies in our operations.
Özellikle mavi yakalı diye tabir ettiğimiz elemanlara çok çeşitli değişik sektörlerden sanayinin ihtiyaçları, talepleri ortaya çıktı.
Different sectors have very high demand for what we call as blue collar workers.
Bursa Ticaret ve Sanayi Odası olarak ve özel sektör olarak beceri geliştirmenin ile ilgili bir model geliştirmemizin gerekliliğini anladık.
As we couldn't find skilled human resources in the market, we decided to act as the Chamber of Commerce to address this problem.
Özellikle meslek yüksek liseleri ve üniversitelerden yetişen elemanlar sanayicinin ihtiyaçlarına yeteri kadar cevap veremedi.
Especially graduates of vocational high schools and universities couldn't respond to the demands of the industry. They didn't have the necessary skills.
Bu noktada bootcamp modelini geliştirdik.
And we developed our bootcamp model in this case.
Bootcamp'in burada tamamen eğitim farkındalığı gözetmeden üniversiteden liseye veya herhangi bir eğitim almamış kişilere beceri geliştirme noktasında öncülük yapıyor, rehberlik yapıyor.
In this regard, without differentiating the level of education of the person, we deliver them the skills needed by the industrialists so that they become employable.
3 ay gibi kısa bir eğitim sürecinden sonra tamamen pratiğe dönük sanayicinin ihtiyaçlarını karşılık verecek elemanlar yetiştiriyor.
After 3 months, the trainees gain the necessary practical skills, on-the-job skills to be able to compete in the market.
Daha ziyade yüksek teknoloji sanayiye yönelik çalışmalarımız.
We focus more on the high-end technology side.
Ve aynı zamanda işe yerleştirme anlamında %80 gibi bir başarıyı yakalamış durumdayız.
And our placement rate is currently at 80%.
Şu anda 60 civarında meslekle ilgileniyoruz.
And we are engaged in 60 occupations right now.
Aynı zamanda bootcamp bünyesi içerisinde mesleki yeterlilik belgelendirme sistemini de kurduk.
And we have established a vocational qualification system as the Bursa Chamber of Commerce.
Sınav yapıyoruz, belge veriyoruz ve aynı zamanda sınavda başarısız olanlara da eğitim veriyoruz.
We carry out the assessments and certifications and we retrain those who fail.
Excellent. So this is a very good example of industry collaborating to work together and deliver this. Great. So, I think in a topic like this, there's so much that we could talk about. So I thought that, if we can engage the audience also, because there are many of you who represent industry and have views or questions, etc. So what we'll do is we'll spend another 15 minutes with Q&A. So if you could just raise your hand, I'll ask you, and please ask the question and ask Who do you want should answer that question? Yeah, please.
You know, we've been deliberating about what can we do to improve, and there are many gaps between various aspects which we've discussed. My name is Darpan Katyal. I represent an institute called IVS, Institute of Vocational Studies. We've been doing this for last 8 years now. So I understand this subject, and the biggest challenge which we have faced in last 8 years is, we've been talking about skill development, but we have not been able to find good trainers to actually train. So first we have to develop the skill of the trainers before we even go out to train the workforce. And unfortunately, in our economy, in our system, people who fail in the field are made to take teaching professions. And unfortunately, they are so badly paid. I'll just give you an example. A mason gets 600 rupees a day, works 1.5 times, date dihadi, and makes 900 at least. So comes out to 27,000, maybe 2 dihadis it goes up to 36,000 a month. Whereas teachers get paid from 15,000 to 25,000 rupees, which is much lesser than the skilled people we are trying to skill further.
Correct.
Now, the problem is that you can't charge more, because most of these people come from a very, who want to get trained, come from a very, with limited means. So the only way, and my question is directly to Mr. Agarwal, their government can play a very important role, because I think we are still very socialist in our approach in terms of education. And we are now opening up with this whole idea of skill development. I think what government can participate and do is, at least for these kind of ventures, if they have removed indirect taxation, which is service tax and stuff like that, so there are exemptions in that. If direct taxation can also be relaxed for some time, then at least that 35% of the tax which they have to pay can be plowed back to improve the quality, and can be shared with the teachers. Because if we don't improve that quality, I don't think we'll be able to make this successful at all.
See, the problem, I agree, there is a problem of trainers. This is also a big problem, and the salaries that you talked about, I think that are also very exceptional. Because what I know of, it is 6 to 8,000, 10,000, 12,000, 15 to 25,000 is something that I am hearing it here. In the field, I have not found any. So it's really pathetic than what you are talking about. The problem is not that giving some more tax shops or some direct benefits will lead to. This is not how the system works, because many times we have seen whatever tax benefits or something you try to plow back in the system grabs it and gulps it down. System doesn't reinvest that to improve the system. It doesn't happen that way. The idea is there a problem of fee? Is it something that people are not ready to pay a fee, and that is why you can't raise a fee, and that is why you can't pay a trainer? I don't believe that is the case. Because if you are able to give good quality training and link it with employment, I think in India people can pay any amount. Today I look after a lot of ITIs in the country. There are 13,000 odd ITIs. Half of it, I'll agree, are not best to the quality. They are somebody where nobody will aspire to go and study. But still I have seen ITIs without much of infrastructure or much of ado. They charge anything between 20,000, 25,000 per year, and they are paid. And students pay and study there. Probably they find some employment out of it, as certification helps them to get some employment in government PSUs or some constable bharti or something. The issue is skills is very closely interlinked with employment. Because skills are so diversified, how do I choose which skill I want to go into? I want to go into a skill which I also love, but at the same time I'm more sure of getting an employment, which is more interlinked with it. So if we are able to close that loop, I think fee-paying models can also work very closely. The problem is that loop is not getting closed. On second front, again coming back to trainers, my personal belief has been that the best trainers can be the industry people only. People who have actually worked in the industry, seen industry for times, they are the best people. They are like people who are on the sunset, who are retiring, who are getting out of work. They are the best people if we can dovetail, because 60 years is no year for retiring these days. With life expectancy going up, everybody in 60s, even in 70s are working and healthy and fine and working well. Issue is how can we bring them, pull them back for training in these institutions. With 6,000, 8,000, 10,000, we'll not be able to do that. There is a hoard of experience which is there in this country. We need to plow that back into the system. And that can only happen if we can make the system a very strong business case, wherein if you come, you pay, you get employment. In our country, for employment, people go to any length. They mortgage their land to get employment. So I don't believe if we are able to link this, there will be an issue of fee-paying model and things like that. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Just raise your hand so I can respond.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a suggestion, an idea which just came to me.
Sure.
And while I was listening to Mr. Das, that actually got accentuated. And the solution is, let's create a platform on which, and platform has to be run by the Government of India, on which all the persons who have enough experience in different fields can enroll, and the industry, wherever it wants, or even the skill councils, wherever they want these skilled people to be employed to train other people, can link it. And the money has to again come from the skill. We have enough money in our kitty to be paid enough so that we can train the freshers or even middle
Like
level
a trainer
managers.
inventory, you're saying, like a potential trainer
Right.
inventory. So
That is one thing. Second, having worked in the industry and in this area only in skill development for almost 20 years now, I find highly skilled students go for IT. Lower level people, they opt for BScs or MScs and then they go for MBAs or things like that. And less qualified people go for diplomas. And many persons, when I ask why you chose diploma, they say, yaar, aur kisi ki yogya nahi tha. But when they get the job, and I think Mr. Pai was showing it in the morning very clearly, after certain years, their skill is good enough to become managers. But they find that freshers are getting more salary than that. So one suggestion is, declare diploma holder equivalent to BSc technical. So that if he wants to go to technical area, fine. If he wants to go for higher education, he does not have to do BA after, let us say, 5 years of experience. Third is ITIs. Most of the people, when I hire, and there are ITIs, and we hire like X number of people, I'm in power sector company, the kind of skill they bring, even the personality, you were talking about soft skills, is so pathetically low that I feel, will I be okay if I hire him? And those people who are little better, they never go for ITIs. And they are not good for even technical things. So what they do, they go for BA or BSc, and thanks God that this service sector improved in India in the last 20 years. They do diploma in, say, hotel management, they do postgraduate in IT, and become lecturer, professor, whatever. So another suggestion is, declare ITIs after metric equivalent to +2 technical. These are two suggestions I have.
okay, thanks. Any other questions? Yeah.
Opportunity with 2 sector skill councils, and I feel that they really don't understand what their brief is. They are actually persistently ineffective. So my question to you, Mr. Agarwal, is it not possible to have mandate, just like you've done for CSR, that every year, say 5% of their workforce has to be certified? Because even this recognizing prior learning, there is this intent to do it. It is, I don't know how successful it will be. Is that if you flood the industry gradually, whether they're qualified, competent or not, you will have the youngsters want to get certified. Currently, I work with a whole lot of people who, when I talk to them about this RPL scheme, they say, ek aur certificate leke kya karenge? Salary mein to there's going to be no difference. So why is the industry not being mandated that you can only employ certified people, and every year you take it to 100 after 10 years?
See, we have done a very unique example in the world where sector skill councils, which are industry-led bodies all over the world, wherever sector skill councils exist, we have given them the mandate not only of setting the standards, also doing assessment and certification. The broad idea was Then when sector skill councils, which are mandated by industry, which have got industry on their shoulders, which are run by them, we don't have any roles to play in them except for providing the seed money. We don't play a role in and out with them. We don't get into their governing council. We don't get into their decision making. They will be able to set the standards and probably have an assessment framework which industry will believe in. We'll have an assessment which will be so transparent and thorough that if somebody gets certified out of it, industry will have complete faith in it and industry will go with it. So that's what initially also I told. Industry has to come forward to create a demand for certified manpower and at the same time work with the Sector Skill Council or any other assessment bodies to see that the assessment ecosystem is so strong that whatever is assessed and certified is good enough for their employment.
And I suppose
both these ends have to be worked together, otherwise it will not come out very easily.
And I think you can't keep mandating things to industry beyond a point after all. There'll be a million things to mandate otherwise.
Mr. Duggal, I will just take this point a little further.
Yeah, we'll have to close with this.
Yeah, just 1 second. This is my second. I wanted to understand, as Mr. Agrawal has said, and we all know, sector skill councils have industry leaders as they are on the board. Can the data be shared that how many sector skill councils, one sector skill council has trained how many people in 1 year and how many people have been taken on job by these own industry leaders who lead these sector skill councils?
So that's a suggestion.
Sir,
okay, so I think my time is run out.
Sir,
I'm going to have to wrap this up.
Sir, on the behalf of NGOs, I am the chairman of Indian Chamber of NGOs. More than 75,000 NGOs are associated with me. I am working on the behalf of NGOs कि जो हम लोग एक ब्रिज बना रहे हैं जो कॉर्पोरेट सेक्टर और एनजीओ के बीच में होगा. He will provide NGO services to the corporate. What type of उसको ट्रेनिंग चाहिए, किस में वो इंटरेस्टेड है, वो ओल्ड एज में इन्वेस्ट करने के मूड में है, ऑर्फनेज में है या ट्रेनिंग में देना चाहता है, क्योंकि CSR में सारे सेक्टर ओपन है, ना कि सिर्फ स्किल डेवलपमेंट. सिर्फ स्किल की बात कर रहे हैं. हमारे पास 3000 सेक्टर पे मेरी 8 वॉल्यूम किताबें आती, मेरा 2 न्यूज़पेपर आता है, ICNGO न्यूज़ एंड ICNGO टाइम्स, और लास्ट 15 ईयर से मैं सिर्फ NGO पर काम कर रहा हूँ. 75,000 NGOs मेरे मेंबर हैं. क्या हम सिर्फ स्किल के जो 75,000 NGOs हैं वो पूरे के पूरे नेशन को कॉम्पिटेंट है सेवा देने के लिए? परंतु मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि गवर्नमेंट के जो नॉब्स है, जो फॉर्मेलिटीज़ है, जो उनके प्रोजेक्ट्स हैं, उनमें सैलरी स्ट्रक्चर इतना कम है कि NGO तो बेईमानी.
But I think this is not the forum really. In this forum, we won't be able to deal with an issue like this.
No,
but you'll have to find a different forum for this, you know. Yeah, you can
so
have
one last suggestion.
So I'll. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Correct. Yeah.
So one last suggestion.
I'll have to close this now. So I'm going to have to thank all my panelists. Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you, Mr. Duran. Thank you, Rajesh. Thank you, Shishir. And thanks all of you for being here. Yeah. Thank you. Bye.